today we're going to talk about RV bearing repacking. Welcome back to Our Rolling Voyage. Repacking your bearings is something that should be done every 12 months or every 12,000 miles, depending on your usage. We ended up doing ours though, it was long before it was time for it to be done. But here's why. So in the last video, the San Benito campground video, when we're at Big Sur in Monterey, there's a clip where I'm pulling out of the harvest host and I have Minnie standing outside of the RV with the camera and she's videoing the RV going past. And what you don't hear in that video, along with tires running over gravel, is a metal to metal rubbing sound. Now, she didn't notice it, and I didn't know it was going on until we got to San Benito and I was downloading the footage, and I always scrub through the footage while I'm downloading it so I can see what I have. And you know, when I did that one, that's when I heard the metal to metal. Well, my initial thought was, dang, the brakes are worn that bad already? That shouldn't be, you know. So I decided to go ahead and start taking wheels apart so I can figure out what was going on. And the first wheel I took apart, it was the rear wheel on the passenger side of the RV. I took the wheel off, pulled the hub off, and brake parts fell out to the ground. And me and Minnie looked at each other and was like, "Oh, that's not good." You know, it could have quite honestly been quite a disaster if one of those parts lodged between the brake and the drum and locked that wheel up. You know, that could have possibly cost us our lives. What I decided to do was just go ahead and take care of the problem. So ordered a new brake assembly because I decided that's going to be the way it's done. I'm not going to replace shoes and parts and everything. I'm just going to replace the whole assembly. It's a lot quicker, right? So ordered the assembly and decided, well, I'll just go ahead and put it together. But before I put it together, there's a couple other things that happened. When I pulled the hub off, the bearing seal stayed on the axle. On the axle rod it comes out. The bearing seal just stayed with it, along with the inner bearing. That's not supposed to happen. All of that is supposed to come apart because you got to press the bearing into the hub. But that stayed on. So I just said, okay, you know, I'm not going to trust this because there are a couple of other things. You know, there was no grease on the spindle part of the axle, that's where the bearings go. That should have been covered with grease to keep moisture off of it so no rust buildup, and there were specks of rust on there. The inside of the hub had no grease. You know, the only thing that had grease was the bearings. That's a poor job. The wind is really kicking up. That's a poor bearing packing job. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and repack all of the bearings. And that's what I did. And that's where the video begins, with me repacking the bearings that I had all the parts for to get done. So we're getting ready to go back to Pacenes, California, to San Benito campground, where I'm going to repack the bearings. See you there. stuff at La Mesa RV in Sanford, Florida, and now that. So I took that apart, all of that fell apart, and I also noticed that the bearings were practically dry. You know, there was no grease on the outer surface of the bearing. There was no grease on the spindle. Inside of the hub, there were pockets where there was no grease. The race in the hub was dry. So I just decided, you know, screw it all. I'm just gonna go ahead and repack all of the bearings and make sure it's done properly and to my liking. Now, the bearings on here, I learned how to do on YouTube. But I've been doing the bearings and brakes on our vehicles for years. I'm the only one for years who have ever put hands on the brakes on me and Minnie's vehicles, and my children's, some of my children's, well. And so I know brakes and I know bearings, but I wasn't quite sure of bearings on the RV. But then I found out that they're even easier than doing the bearings on a motor vehicle. So I'm going to do that today, and I'm going to show y'all the tools that I have that will be needed to get the job done. First, we're going to start with the impact driver and 7/8 inch socket for my lug nuts. The extension is so I can be out past the hub on here. A lot of gloves, a lot of rubber gloves, because it's going to get a little messy. I have a rubber mallet. I have a 3-pound hammer for when I'm putting the seal back in to tap the tool to get it back in. Doesn't necessarily have to be a 3-pound hammer. This is just, the other one I have is a 4-pound hammer. So, you know, I have that and the rubber mallet. Pry bar will be used to get the seal out of the hub. Screwdrivers, I have 2 different sizes here. Don't necessarily need 2 different sizes, but I do for you know, whatever I'll need them for. Channel lock pliers for getting that nut off. Torque wrench. I have a breaker bar that I'll use to secure the nut down, the castle nut, or in this case it's not a castle nut. They don't use them on these anymore. But I don't use my torque wrench for tightening things down. I use the torque wrench only for torquing. Grease, I use red and tacky. You can use whatever you want, but if you don't know what grease was used on the bearings, and just make sure you clean all of the grease off of the spindle, out of the hub, and clean the grease off of all of the bearings so you can put new grease on, because you don't want to mix greases. You don't want the manufacturer or the dealer to use a grease and then you use something totally different and mixing the two. So you want to make sure that's all cleaned off. Then I have my grease gun. Oh, to make sure all of that stuff is, all that grease is cleaned off, brake parts cleaner will do just fine. I have this one, and I have 4 more in the box right here. I have 4 more. Then I have my bearing, my seals right here. These are Dexter seals to go on Dexter axles. Also, I have a bearing packer, and there are a couple of brands of bearing packers. paper towels. And a lot of people use a piece of wood when they're pressing the bearings. I mean when they're pressing the seal into the hub. But I always believe, not only am I just a tool guy, I like tools, but I also am a firm believer of using the right tool to do the job. So instead of using wood, I'll use a bearing press to press the bearing into place, into the hub, put it in properly. And I'm not saying that using a piece of wood is the wrong way to do it, by no means, because, you know, a lot of people do it and the job is done right. So I'm not saying that. It's just, you know, my, I don't know, OCD personality, my CDO personality, severe CDO, where the letters in OCD has to be placed in order. But those are the tools, and now we're gonna go ahead and get her done. First thing one of the big thing that you want to have down when you're doing this, you want to have something on the ground. I use this tarp so I can cover the whole area, but you want something down to prevent dust, dirt, gravel, all that stuff to kick up onto your bearings when you are packing them and replacing them, and you know, that's all that. So you want something on the ground too. So I have, the other thing that I have is my 20-pound jack, my 20-ton jack is already under there. And when you do your, when you jack your wheel up, because we have 6-point stabilizer system, so I'm going to just jack the wheel up off the ground. I'm not going to put the jack under the frame or anything like that. It's just going under the wheel. But when you're jacking it up, you don't want to put your jack on your axle. You want your jack to be on, the leaf. If you can see, I don't have the jack under the axle. The jack is under the leaf spring, because you can bend your axle, you can dent it, and you don't want that to happen. Now I'm using an impact driver to remove my lug nuts, but if you were using a lug wrench, of course, because this wheel free spins, free wheels, you will have the tire on the ground first and break the lugs free. But because I'm using the impact driver, I don't need to do that. Alright, then once you get that cap off, then you got to get this retaining clip off of the nut. Alright, and then this will be finger tight on there because of the way it's got to be done. We have a washer here. Give me a paper towel, please.
That's
Okay.
fine.
All right. Now, you want to be careful, extra careful, and not let your bearings and stuff drop to the ground, because it could be quite messy. and your bearings get extra dirty, then you got to spend extra time cleaning a bunch of grit out of the bearings. So what I do is I put something in here, screwdriver, needle nose pliers, whatever, in there, and then I get it going, and I make sure that it lands on there instead of the ground when I pull it off. Alright, put me out another piece of paper towel right there, please, dear. That's good. Then I'm going to remove the hub. Alright, then once the hub is removed, then I'm going to take the pry bar. Well, first let me do this. Then you're going to want to get your the seal that's in there out, and you just take and put the pry bar under the seal and just pop it out, going around it like that. Then once you've done that, then you want to remove your bearing. And then all the grease that's in this seal, that's in this hub, you want to go ahead and take it all out. Minnie went to get me a pair of safety glasses. I should have pointed that out as an item to have. So, cleaning the bearings, you're gonna want to shoot them with the stuff here, with the brake parts cleaner, and wipe them out. Looking at my bearings, and there is nothing I can say is wrong with the bearings. The bearing moves freely, and next is the big bearing. Get all the grease off of it. See, this one is not moving freely. It's still gliding on grease. So that means there's still grease in there. You can't hear the rollers shake, then that means there's still grease in there. That means it's a significant amount of grease in there. So, see what I'm saying there? How I was talking about, you hear that sound? The sound of bearings of the rollers moving freely. Now, what I'm going to do is just take some grease, and I'm going to throw it on that spindle. Being careful, again, not to put it on surfaces
where it should not be. Next thing I want to do is grease my bearing here. So with this one, take this, put that on here, like so. Right. And then we screw this back on here if it can. Probably can't. So then you put the cap back on it, and you simply put it in the bowl, and you're going to push down on the bowl like that until you see the grease coming through the bearing. Okay, and if y'all can see here, I have the grease coming through the bearing right there. Okay, so once you get that going, and that's supposed to screw down on there, but it's not, so that's fine. We'll take that off, and then I'll just remove the bearing with my fingers. The important thing is not how it comes off. What's important is how it leaves the bearing. Alright, so I got my bearing good and lubed, but I gotta be honest, I forgot a step. So I'm gonna go back after I get this grease all over here, all over the bearing here, and I'm gonna give it a turn just to make sure that the grease is all through there. Here's one of the things that you really want to do. Here is this. Grease up your hub. I mean, greased up really good. I have my bearing greased up really good, but what I'm going to do, just for good measure, and because of my CDO, I'm going to go ahead and throw some more grease on the outside of the bearing because I see dry spots. So let's go ahead and lube that up really good. Alright, move up the inside really good. And then I'm going to seat that right inside there. It's going to seat right in there on top of the race. Don't have to be pressed in or anything like that. Just seat it in. I'm going to set my seal in here. I'm going to set my seal in like that. Alright. And with that sitting there, I'm just going to take my 3-pounder and tap. And I'm just moving it around to make sure everything goes in the way it's supposed to be. And you can hear the difference in sound before, you hear a difference in sound. Before it just sounded like it was hitting the seal. Then you could tell when it started hitting the hub. All right, and that's all flush right there. So I'm good and flush. Let me go ahead and put the hub on. But first, let's just make sure we have plenty of grease here. Gotta make sure I got plenty of grease here. Like I said, you can be liberal with it, especially on the race. All right. So we got grease on there. Just clean up a little bit here. Then once we do that, then you can go ahead and set the hub back up there. But do it carefully to make sure you don't mar your bearings and your seal. So that's on there good and snug. Now what I want to do is go ahead and pack my outer bearing. Got plenty of grease on there. And then we'll take this bearing in. We'll go ahead and seat it in. Alright. Bearing is seated in. Take the washer. And you see the washer has a little flat spot right here. So it can only go on one way. Alright. And go ahead and put some grease on your washer. It's going to get grease on it anyway, but still, put a nice coat of grease on there. Put your washer on. You get a little grease on your threads too. All right. So then, put your nut on. Go ahead and thread your nut on. And once you thread your nut on, look at that. So what I'm going to do is take and just tighten this down a little bit. I'll tighten it down, but spin that wheel as you do that. As you tighten it, make sure that your bearings are turning and you're getting good lube. They're all getting lubed all the way around while you're securing it. Alright. Tighten it down until you can't move it. That means it's already there. It's all there. Then, so go ahead and torque that down. Just torque down to 50 foot-pounds. Alright. And then, after you torque it down to 50 foot-pounds, here, set that down. Then you want to come back and loosen it. All you want to do is tighten it, finger tight. Then bring it back, finger tight, and snug it just a touch. Just like that. After you do that, then you want to replace your clip. Okay. And you may have to adjust the nut on here a little bit, just to, so you can get your clip on properly. Alright, so got the clip on properly. Alright, and my brakes sound like they're still in adjustment, so should be good on that. And I pull the tire off, and then when I pull the hub off, all the parts from the RV, the adjustment part, there's a piece of spring, all of this, that stuff just fell out of the bottom. It just fell out of the bottom of the thing here, you see. And it's just messed up. And then I look at it, and the spring that's on here is the wrong spring. It's an oversized spring, and the spring is supposed to be smaller. So I don't know what they did. And as a result of that, you see on here the rubbing. This dug into the side of the hub, right? And all of these dots on here are wear indicators. You see how they're all gone? They're all gone. All of the dots that's supposed to be around here are all worn off because this was put on wrong. I don't know what they did, but they put it on wrong. The other thing that the guy said at the dealership, he said the wire in here was cut. There's no cut wires in here. There are no wires in here that has been cut. When he was trying to tell me that the brakes were working on the RV, he said a wire was cut. No, it's not. There were no wires cut in any of the wheels. All right, then I go for the bearing packing to repack all the other bearings, because now I don't trust them. And none of the bearings were packed properly. As a matter of fact, when I pulled this one off, I pulled this hub off of the tire, and the seal stayed on. It stayed on the axle. So I'm just wondering, you know, who do they have working for them? What caliber of person do they have working for them? And I'm sorry, really, to bring this kind of thing to you all, you know, but the purpose of me doing this is basically to say, no matter what it is, because I mean, it might not be, you know, all the techs at La Mesa, you know, who were that careless. It could have just been this one, you know, or whatever. I don't know. This problem might not exist at all La Mesa RVs. I don't know, you know. But no matter what dealership you go to with your RV or with your car, you know, double check, because this could potentially be a problem for our lives, our very lives. You know, we could have been going, and we've been driving, you know, down some pretty steep hills, you know, with cliffs out west here. You know, if a tire decided to lock up or something and cause a problem, a blowout, and then that blowout decides to take out another tire, we could be toast. So the purpose for me, you know, doing this is just to say, check. Whatever someone does, you know, check. Even if you just have to go home and randomly take off a tire or whatever, and just to look and see that, you know, randomly something is done right or wrong, double check and take it back if it's not. Don't just accept what they do. You know, I am, like I said, I don't try to do this kind of video. I don't like doing this kind of video. You know, I don't like watching these kinds of videos, and I'm really sorry that I have to do this kind of video, you know. But the fact of the matter is, if it's not done, then people don't know. People don't know, you know. And I think you all, you know, you all have a right to know that, you know, you need to be aware. So that's it. This is not part of, it's not a regular episode, you know, but it is something that needs to be done. Needless to say, La Mesa RV is not going to be a dealership that we use for anything anymore. Just not gonna. It's not gonna go there anymore. It's not gonna go there anymore. You know, it's just, this is just not right. So, anyway, thanks for watching. Safe travels, and we'll see y'all next time.